We're going to get started in about 2 minutes.
Right,
okay, we're not getting started in 2 minutes. We're going to go ahead and get started now. I thought I lost our third panelist here. The party of three. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. This is, as you've heard, our Hot Talk. My name is Becky Rupert McMahon. I'm the Chief Executive here at the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association. We are thrilled to have you here for our conversation. I see lots of new faces in the audience, so I'm going to say very quickly, our Hot Talks were created in February of 2016, and they were started as a monthly dialogue with not only our members, but also the general community. We created them because there were lots of things happening at the time about immigration. It was a brand new President Trump administration, and there were lots of things happening. And we wanted an opportunity to create a conversation with our members and the public in a way that we could take on the most critical and serious issues of the day, but do it in a way that was honest, do it in a way that was civil, and do it in a way that was respectful, even when there were very, very different views in the room. And so came our Hot Talks conversation, and we've evolved now a year and a half later to taking on what I believe, personally and professionally, is one of the most important issues for our community, which is what's happening inside of our criminal justice system. So we are thrilled today to welcome those who have been at our Hot Talks in the past, as well as new folks. We do these every month. If you have interest in being involved in future programs, there's a bowl in the middle of your table. You can leave your business card, or you can write your name on a card with an email address, and we will invite you to future Hot Talks conversations. So with no more from me, because I'm the least important here, I'm going to hand this over to our moderator, who will introduce our panelists today. Our moderator is Matt Gerbach, seated here in the middle. Matt is a partner with the law firm of Benish Friedlander, where I used to be many months ago. Matt is a litigator. He is a seasoned first chair trial lawyer, but he does not work in the criminal arena. And that's part of why we invited Matt to moderate today's conversation. There are lots of folks who swim inside the criminal justice system. Matt is not one of those people. And so we think that's what most of our folks watching this program are going to be, people who are not living it. And we thought there would be some real value in bringing a different perspective to this. Matt also happens to be a member of our board of directors for the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association, and he's a member of our Thought Leadership Committee, which is the committee that helps us drive forward these critical conversations. Both in terms of planning our Hot Talks, but also a whole lot more. So if you have any interest in either of those opportunities, our board or leadership within our Thought Leadership, we would welcome you. And with that, Matt, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. And I'm a Brown season ticket holder, which until recently didn't mean anything. now it means something. It's my pleasure that you all decided to join us today. I'm joined up here by two outstanding public servants. To my right is Brandy Carney. Brandy is the Cuyahoga County Cuyahoga Community Protection and Safety Officer. Before that, she was the director of the Public Safety and Justice Services here in Cuyahoga County. To my left is Judge John Russo. Judge Russo is the administrating and presiding judge in Cuyahoga County. And we're all very fortunate to have them here with us. In the Hall of Fame of cliches, right next to Let's Do Lunch, is when a presenter will say, I intend for this to be a dialogue. I'm going to say that here. I intend for this to be a dialogue. However, it's not a cliche. We really are, this is dependent upon your interactions and your questions as we go through this. So if at any point anybody has anything or any questions or any perspective that they wish to add, please raise your hand and we will get you a microphone and we will welcome your participation. As many of you are aware, on October 2nd, the Cleveland Plain Dealer reported that there was a sixth inmate death in the previous 2 months. And over the last couple of months, there's been a tremendous amount of dialogue that has gone and that has occurred in our community with respect to the conditions in the Cuyahoga County Jail here in downtown Cleveland. One of the things that really put these wheels into motion is a report that was authored by the by the Marshal's office. The United States Marshals conducted an audit of the Cuyahoga County Jail, and they did that between October 30th and November 1st. And when they did that audit, when they performed that audit, they found a laundry list of shocking conditions that left our entire community, the judges, public servants, lawyers, all stunned with what they found. The report itself identified 22 functional areas. They identified 22 functional areas which were deemed to be unsatisfactory. And those ran the spectrum from anywhere between health services to food services to conditions in individual cells. From top to bottom, there was no way of hiding it. The Cuyahoga County Jail was an absolute mess with the rights and with the living conditions of the inmates highly in very, very dire straits. On November 8th, Judge Russo authored a letter to Armin Budish asking, expressing concern over the conditions in the jail, re-expressing concern with respect to the security conditions within the courthouse itself, and most recently, on December 5th, the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association issued its own statement with respect to the conditions in the Cuyahoga County Jail. Simply stated, ladies and gentlemen, the conditions in the jail are unacceptable, period, full stop, and nobody would ever disagree with that. So the purpose of what we are doing here today is to discuss a couple of things. One, how did we get here? Two, how do we get out of this? How do we fix this? And you've got two people up here on this stage who are on the front lines of getting this, moving this, and hopefully getting us to a better place. So the first question I have, very simple, Judge Russo, what was your reaction when you read the U.S. Marshal's report?
Well, first of all, I thank the Bar Association, CMBA, for being cutting edge, because while it affects us as public servants, it affects all of you and any of you who are watching or listening. So I know that's important. And so I do thank the Bar Association for looking at topics that affect the community of Cuyahoga County. So that's important to thank off the bat. I do want to thank a colleague of mine, Judge Michael Nelson from our Cleveland Municipal Court, who's here as well and has had an opportunity to speak about some of those issues. So I thank you, Judge, for joining us here as well. With respect to the report, I mean, and you should know this, the young lady to the right of me, so we work well together. So when Brandy was brought to the position by the county executive, filling the position, the void position of where Frank Bova was at, I will just say, so you know, that this isn't a relationship where she and I have difficulty communicating or being able to communicate. So I say that because we share some of the common themes of wanting to improve the criminal justice system. So I get a report. I think one of the very first things was that Brandy and I spoke about is, I got the report the same way you got the report. And that was disturbing to me, being one of the stakeholders, is, you know, Cleveland.com gave me the report as opposed to an opportunity to have that report ahead of time as a stakeholder and to be able to engage the bench and engage others. Now, I'm told the report was delayed and maybe the executive didn't have it as long as maybe others think he did. But that was the very first thing. So getting the report and digesting it was the first thing I did, Matt. And then once I did that, I was able to outline what here affects the daily process of those who are accused of a crime, who are sitting in the county jail, that are part of the common pleas court, and those who are there on violations or treatment or punishment, serving sentences. How do we deal with those emergency situations and how are they being treated? And the concern I have then was to go back to my judges and have further discussions about what we might need to do in order to make sure that the situation didn't affect those who were in the county jail housed there. So when I looked at the report and I had a chance to review it, I think the shock and awe at first of what was there, and then how fast can we move with the county executive and others to correct that situation.
All right, thanks. You, Brandon? What was your first reaction when you read the report?
Sure. Well, first, I too want to thank the association here for allowing us to speak today. for having this, and I also appreciate Judge Russo's comments and our relationship and working on this together to fix these issues that we have in front of us. Quite honestly, I was very surprised by the report. I'm fairly new to this role, but you know, when we had the 6th death in the jail, the county executive did reach out and ask the U.S. Marshals to come in and do an assessment of our jail because we wanted to see what was wrong or what they identified. They too have prisoners that we house within our jail. But I was shocked. We have, on a yearly basis, we receive the state corrections facility comes up and does an assessment of our jail. And we always do very good on those assessments. The only 2 issues that we had been dinged on previously were the overcrowding in our jail, which we were aware of, and some of that is, you know, it's an archaic building and the way that it's built, but that's something that we are aware of. And then most recently, they had identified some of the issues with medical and mental health in the facility, but that was it, nothing else. And so to receive this report from the marshals with a laundry list of items was shocking and disturbing, and something we immediately wanted to get to the bottom, identify what was actually valid or what maybe they didn't have all the information and what we could do to fix it immediately.
Fair enough. Judge, in your letter to the county executive, you wrote, among other things, the court is not responsible for the operations of the county jail. Now, I can say in talking with community members, it's not so often that there's distinctions when community members are looking at it between the judiciary, the county executive's office, the sheriff's department, etc. So to the public, how can you explain that sentence? Because I know that when the public looks at it, you know, you're the one wearing the black robe and you're the one dealing with inmates in and out of your courtroom on a daily basis. How is it that the court is not responsible?
Yeah, so you know, the building itself is under the control of the county executive. So we don't control the building. We don't maintain any of the day-to-day policies and procedures of the sheriff's department. The sheriff oversees the county jail. So we as a court, and that's why I wrote my letter on behalf of our judges, is the concern we were having obviously didn't happen the day I wrote the letter, right? So everything before the letter that we were hoping to address and we had brought to the attention of the sheriff, some of the concerns that we were having, both medical with those who are mental health, those who are just receiving medical care, and then some of the concerns that we had about the housing of the inmates. Those concerns had been addressed, and some of them had been addressed in private meetings, but at the point that I wrote the letter, it had risen to a level of concern for us that we felt that it needed to be put in writing. I will tell you, Matt, that one of the only parts that we play as a court is that when we have a grand jury, so we have 3 grand juries that run 4 months at a time, the grand jury foreperson and the grand jury members are charged with writing a report to the court about the state of the jail. So they have an opportunity to go in, and the sheriff and his staff will show the jurors the jail and present them with the living conditions. The foreperson writes a report. That report gets filed with our clerk of court, who I'll note is here as well. Ms. Bird is here. And that report gets filed by, I believe, the clerk down to the Supreme Court as well. So we do have that only opportunity to view, and that viewing is only done by an invitation by the sheriff. But that's about the only check that we have on the jail itself as a court.
In your normal day-to-day interactions with criminal defense lawyers, those lawyers are on the front lines as well in dealing with their clients, moving in and out of the jail. Had any of them throughout the months or years leading up to this reported to you or your colleagues what the conditions were like? Were you getting any feedback whatsoever from either the defendants themselves, or the citizens that were coming through your courtroom, or the defense lawyers as to what the conditions were?
Yeah, so that's a good question. As the administrative judge, I get, so anybody can write a letter to me, and so I get a lot of letters written to me from the inmates. I read every one of the letters and I respond to every one of them. Some of those responses are in writing, and some of those responses I'll go to the public defenders and say to Mr. Stanton and his staff, I have a concern about this inmate's writing. I'd like you to go and investigate, and if something needs to be done, you need to come back to me. So I have found as the administrative judge that that's my outlet to go to of the lawyers to go back in and say, is this a situation? What I have found is some of those writings do have concerns about their mental health, about medications that they're not receiving. And so that's one way that I communicate with maybe those who have issues that are within the jail. The second is with lawyers, and I see a number of lawyers, the criminal defense lawyer, the CCDLA bar, as well as the public defenders. Those complaints that I have received as the administrative judge are having access to their clients. And so their clients, it's tough because the number of sheriffs have been reduced in the building. In the past, sometimes you could see your client on the floor, meaning you're up in my courtroom, 16D, you could visit with your client on my floor in a holding cell. But that's not allowed anymore because of the decrease of amount of deputies on the floor. And so those concerns we've addressed, though, with the county, allowing defendants to be seen on off pretrial in Thursdays and Friday afternoons. And so the sheriff was very good with us, and they worked. And I point to Brandy only because the sheriff reports to her. And so we have worked through some of that, although I still have continuing issues with the visitation that the lawyers have with their clients.
Fair enough. And what reports, Brandy, have you been getting from the sheriff since the issuance of the report?
So myself and Sheriff Pinkney, and we have an interim jail director, George Taylor, who was previously the chief deputy and reported directly to the sheriff. We've kind of been working on these together along with other staff within the sheriff's office. Again, going through each item, the validity of each item. We took some immediate actions on things that were very easy, order new trays, new shower curtains, things of that nature. We identified which of the corrective actions have a longer, policies and procedures. You can't just update it up, as everybody knows here. We need to take time. We need to train everybody on them adequately. We did just recently submit a contract with the American Corrections Association. So while the marshals came in and provided the report, this national organization will come in, look at our operation, and help us updating these policies and procedures, looking at that report, and hopefully getting to a place where we can, all of those issues are corrected, and we're not in the situation that we are now. So we have all been actively working, including the county executive and chief of staff, on these issues.
One of the solutions that you hear when you're dealing with any societal problem is privatization, right? Whether or not you agree with it or you disagree with it, one of the solutions that is often proposed is, well, let's privatize it. Let's take it out of public hands and let's put it into private hands. Would that be a viable solution here, Judge?
I don't know if I could speak to that specifically, only because it's an executive decision. I will share that privatizing, well, first of all, when privatizing, there's a profit, right? So if you're privatizing it, you're bringing in someone and they're making a profit off of your jail. I'm not quite sure that's the model we want. And when we have privatized in the state of Ohio, and we have, so the state of Ohio has built jails that have been privatized. I don't believe the results have been positive in the state of Ohio as well.
Okay.
I would echo Judge Russo's comments. The sheriff is involved in criminal justice, their entire department. That's what they know. So taking the jail out and adding another entity in, as he said, for profit, I don't really know how that would fix things. I think there's an opportunity for all of us in the county and criminal justice to work together on this issue now.
Okay. Let's talk nuts and bolts, if we could, for a minute, Judge. How has either your knowledge of the jail condition prior to the issuance of the report and then post issuance in the last couple of weeks, how does that impact the way you do your job, both in terms of bond that you'll set for defendants, or sentencing, or those aspects of what you do on a daily basis?
Well, so I wrote a letter to my judges, which became a public record as well. Recently. And so what I wrote in that letter, and my concern in that letter is, I believe, the bonds that we're setting are, again, I'll go back to the whole bail bond concerns that the county has had. I believe we made great strides, and we're continuing to assess bonds in a positive way. So it wasn't my concern about going back to the bonds, but I was asking judges who got cases to look at them to make sure if there was a motion filed, make sure you set the motion hearing so that you have a motion on the issue of a bond. My bigger concern was that we are provided jail lists on a daily basis as judges. So I can go in and see who's currently in the county jail, and it kind of breaks us out. Just recently, the county executive asked for a copy, or not county exec, county council asked for a copy of those, and we provided those. But it does, for example, on my docket this morning, and as judges and staff, we look at them, it'll say, I have 4 inmates who are currently waiting pretrial and trials. I have 2 that are waiting to be sentenced, and there may be a delay in that sentencing. And I may have 3 on the list that are probation violations, and then I have 2 that are waiting for the sheriff to transport them to an institution if I've sentenced them to an institution or an inpatient treatment. So we can gauge that list to make sure that we're accurate on those individuals who are in the list. And we do that, but I challenge my judges to spend some extra time with their jail list to make sure that if there was someone in the county jail that might be moved somewhere different. So, for example, one of my judges looked and he was able to say, well, I have 5 individuals serving local incarceration. He looked at the types of charges and said, well, let me take 3 of these individuals, put them out on a house arrest, so we put an ankle monitor on them, allow them to be outside of the jail during this time of reorganization within the jail. So that's what I've asked my judges to do in order to keep our eyes on them.
And Brandy, we were talking before we came up here about opportunities to keep the jail population down, and the judge just mentioned ankle bracelets. Could you tell us a little bit about what opportunities you see to keep the jail population down?
Sure. Well, first, I appreciate Judge Russo saying, you know, and it is all of us working together and them looking at those numbers and using the ankle bracelets. We currently have 300 bracelets for the county. So it's an opportunity for people to not spend their time in jail, pre-trial or probation, but instead they're out and they're monitored with the ankle bracelet, and let's them know, lets our officers know if they go out of a certain boundary that's made for them. We're also working on a new mental health diversion facility. So this is a large new initiative looking for a place to house and forward with mental health, people with mental health, some temporary housing. So that's a new issue where a significant amount of population, unfortunately, in the jail is there are also mental health issues, and so an opportunity for those numbers to go down. The county did purchase within the last 2 years 2 other facilities within the county that we could use for population overflow. So Bedford Heights has over 200 beds. We are using that facility, as well as Euclid, which has about 80 beds. That we're able to use that facility now to move inmates out to those places. You know, so those are all ways, again, to control this bail population, as well as working with the courts.
Go ahead, Judge.
Yeah, so I you know, and I've said it to Brandy, and I'll say it again, and I'll say it here, is, you know, the time we invested in those 300 ankle bracelets, the court played a role in that, in actually helping with the purchase of those. I would like to see, I mean, there's a cap. So if there's a cap, that means that there's a wait list. And if there's a wait list, that means they're in the county jail. And so we have asked, and I think it's come back that the budget doesn't allow for, because it takes a lot of manpower or woman power to watch the bracelets, right? And so I understand the concern, and I challenge the county executive, you know, we cap it at 300, but could we actually have more and maybe move resources around that would free up the jail numbers, because we have people who are available or been ordered to have an ankle bracelet, but they're sitting in the county jail until one becomes available. So I know I've posed that to Brandy and to the county executive, but that would obviously help and relieve some of the stressors that we feel there, with judges knowing that the ankle bracelets were available and that monitoring was being done.
Availability aside, what's the efficacy like with the ankle bracelets? Do you find them to be effective?
They are effective. I mean, of course, cutting them off, you can't stop that process from happening. But I think the sheriff, at the time we instituted it, and again, Brandy may speak to that, there were, what do they get, boots on the ground, right? So we had cars originally that were stationed in so many locations around the county that if a tampering happened, a car was nearby to get to wherever the tampering was to see if they could resolve the issue or potentially be there quickly. I know that some of that was pulled back because of staffing. So I don't know if you get a tamper today, how long it's going to take somebody, or whether they've enlisted local enforcement to help them. But so we believe as a court, it helps us with the ability to know we don't want them in this area because maybe the alleged felonious assault happened here, or the theft happened at a Giant Eagle. So we could put a barrier to say you can't go in this area, and if they went to that area, the alarm would go off for a sheriff. So we believe as a court it's effective, and I think it does allow for us to learn about a pattern of an individual who might, if found guilty or plead guilty, be on probation to us. It also, we tell them, it gives them a track record for me as a judge to say, hey, John Russo, you did really well on pretrial services and on an ankle bracelet, and you never violated it for the 3 months, and your case is resolved. I am going to put you on probation or community control sanction because I believe the risk is less because you've proven that you can follow direction. So those are good things for us as judges to look back at.
This report is weighty, it's long, it's comprehensive, there's a lot in it. We talked a little bit about your initial reactions when you read this, Judge. Life is about priorities and being able to fix things in an order and address things in an order. What in this report did you see that needs to be addressed first? If you had to assign priorities to what? So obviously everything in here needs to be addressed, but if you had to assign priorities to the top ones, which ones would they be and why?
That's pretty hard, but I may go just a little bit off that again. So the priorities should be looked collaboratively with stakeholders. That hasn't been done yet. So I haven't been invited to a table to say, hey, this is what we're looking at and how does the stakeholders play a part in it. So I make that comment. I see things in the Cleveland.com before I see them anywhere else. So I saw that things were done and some things were implemented, but I was unaware of that until I read it in the paper. And so those things that I believe that are important are the health and welfare of that individual. We have individuals who are there who are accused of a crime, right? And
they're innocent.
They're innocent until proven guilty, but they're there. And so they're there, and they're there because of something that happened, but that doesn't mean that their life should be any less valued being someone who's sitting incarcerated than it would be if they were out. And so the concerns I have are, their ability to, the hygienes, the sleeping, the medical is one of the biggest things. That's been going on a long time with us having concerns. So when I wrote the letter and then the mental health court judges wrote the letter, again, we would not have pushed that, but it's a #1 concern of ours. Imagine the cycle. Someone who comes in off the street, who's on their medication, they have a prescription for their medication, yet for whatever reason they're not getting it in the county jail, and then they decompose. When they decompensate, it costs you and me, taxpayers, lots of money, but it costs them the opportunity to either resolve with their mental state being intact. I mean, decompensation, what does that mean to all of you? Well, it means they're off their meds and they don't know what the heck's going on and they can't assist who? Me or the lawyers. So what do we have to do? We have to send them for rehabilitation. And that cycle, we send them to North Coast to rehabilitate, medication, then they come back to us, and then we run right back into that same problem. If you don't get them back in the courtroom quickly enough, they keep decompensate again. And so those have been concerns of ours long before Brandy, long before this county executive, that we have been discussing how does that medical unit work so that we don't have that situation. And so that concern continues to be probably the #1 concern if I'm going to look at that, is the medical treatment for those who are in the county jail.
Okay. I believe we have a question.
We want one of the welcome questions. If anyone had any.
Yeah, I got a comment. I guess everybody's waiting for me to make a comment. So
here comes the microphone.
Yeah, let me make it now. Michael Nelson, I'm the judge who, on October 3rd, when I read in the newspaper that the 6th person that died in jail, I immediately indicated I would not be sending anybody else to the county jail unless they were the most violent of violent. On October 3rd, that hit the national press. The response locally was, wow. On October 10th, I met with the Plainville editorial board. Prior to my meeting with the editorial board on the 9th, the county executive met with the editorial board. The editorial board's response to me was, we met with the county executive, we talked about this, and his response was, yeah, okay. At that point, this issue started getting national attention. Once it got national attention, the county executive and others, the sheriff, I met with the sheriff, and one of the disappointing things that happened when I met with the sheriff was not the sheriff's response, but the response of some of the people responsible for caring for people. For example, when I said, "What are we gonna do this about these suicides?" The response was, "Hey, you know, suicide, gonna commit suicide, they're gonna commit suicide." Then we talked last week, we had an open forum. Young men and young women, the lack of sanitary supplies provided, women are not given us sanitary supplies as a form of punishment or because of incompetence. Men and women forced to stand up, to try to sleep standing up because of urine and feces on the floor. And then at some point, you can't stand up and sleep. So you lay your mattress down in what? So these are issues that have been, I'm sorry to the, I forget what your position was. This is not new information. That's right. This is old information. The judge is correct. They've been trying to get responses. So this is not new stuff. The only reason it's new is because it hit the national news and now it's gotten kind of attention. That's the comment. Here's the question. The question is, we've had Sean Levert, we've had numerous people die in that jail. When will the county executive assume the responsibility of, one, ensuring that the management numbers, we have women guarding men because they don't have enough men. When will they staff up? Why did they transfer, encourage the transfer of operations of the city of municipal court jails to the county when they knew they were ready to assume the responsibility of treating, housing, or taking care of the number of inmates that they would get?
And that's a concern, Judge, for not just the Cleveland Community Court, but the suburban courts too.
The suburban courts, right. They took over these, and then why not bring the people who've been running the jails into the county and hire them in some kind of way? Because we understand that many of those people would not take jobs because of the low wage being offered them. We have lieutenants who are working for the Department of Corrections who are available right now to be hired. They don't need training, they just need hiring. So the responsibility, when will the county take responsibility for addressing the issues that people are suffering from, which is becoming quite close, if not already crossed the line, of amendment violations against cruel and unusual punishment?
Thank you, Judge. You know, as I said before, I truly feel the sheriff, the county executive, obviously one death is too many. We are taking it seriously. We're trying to address all the problems immediately that can be done that way. Again, the more systemic, we're going to take some time. We're bringing in nationally accredited associations to work with us. We're trying to find a new regional jail director with a national search. We've reached out to the ACA as well as another national and state corrections organizations to help us with that search. You know, it's unfortunate that, you know, the report that was made and the light on the way that the conditions are within the jail, but we do take it serious and we are trying to address. I think what you said and what the judge said before about making sure we're all brought together and identifying and discussing issues and paths forward is really important, and we need to make sure we do that.
My name is Lance Johnson. I'm just a lawyer like most of you here. I'm not even a criminal lawyer, and I live in the suburbs. But I have a perspective to bring today to this. And Judge, thank you. Judge, thank you. And Ms. Carney, thank you very much. I just have a unique experience that I employ 32 people who live in Cleveland. And out of that 32, in the last 4 years, 2 of them died of heroin overdoses. One of them was killed recently in a felony murder and a drug deal gone bad, and the other one's on trial for felony murder. In addition to that, I have an employee who's been in county several times, and I want to talk about him really briefly. And then I want to talk about the wife of one of the 6 men who was killed in county. It's not a suicide. He was murdered. And I tried to bring her here today, but this forum, they were uncomfortable, so they didn't come. So what I'm going to say is hearsay, but they will do affidavits, because I'm only going to report what they've said to me. The first thing I want to say is that, and they call it county, as you know, they don't call it jail, it's just county. County is run by gangs, period. There's no argument about this. The heartless felons, the Crips, the Cutthroats, the Bloods, the Puerto Rican gang, and the Blades run the jail. They run county. The COs, every single one of the COs is corrupted. Every one. And you say, and I know you're all like, well, Lance, why can you say this? It's because the COs that we have, they were brought up in the same neighborhoods as the inmates, okay? They know everybody. As soon as you're in there for any period of time, you find out, well, what's your name? Where do you come from? Who do you, oh, you're related to this person. And then the favors start, and they ask favors. And those favors might be innocent. You know, my car, the CO says, my car broke down. And the inmate says, oh, I know somebody that can fix it. And so they fix it. And then the CO owes a favor to the inmate. And this goes on every single day. And every single day, there are gang members from one of those gangs in county. Might not be the same person all the time, but they rotate through. And the gangs run this jail. Now, let me talk about the young man who was killed this summer. His name is Larry Johnson. He worked for me for about a year. He was picked up on a parole violation on a non-physical or non-violent crime.
Do you have a question for?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. I know I'm running on, but I just want to make this and I'm going to stop.
Right.
Okay. So Larry Johnson was in there for a non-violent crime with a parole violation, and 2 weeks later he was, quote, committed suicide. His wife will swear up and down, and I wish you to come today, but she just couldn't do it, that he did not commit suicide. So here's the question. Why isn't this crime being investigated properly? It's been 5 months since he was killed. And there's still, the world is still saying, and the county is still saying this was a suicide, and it wasn't.
Well, so I don't know if that's been posed. I'll just answer. If that's been posed to the authorities would be doing an investigation. I'm unaware of the allegation of it being a crime. If you haven't talked to someone about it being a crime, then I would ask that you instruct the family to.
They have, Your Honor.
Okay, so I would just say that if it's Mr. O'Malley's office or police, that's moving forward, I would assume, but I would ask you to follow up with him. I wish I had an answer, but I don't. I will say you made one comment and you made it overall general, and I just have to step in and say, I don't believe every individual that works for the county jail is corrupt. So I'll step out and say that I don't believe there are very good and competent workers that work inside our jail. I'm not saying that there aren't individuals who are corrupt, but I can't say that everybody is corrupt. And so I just wanted to say that because that's a comment made, and it's generalized. All of you may walk out of here with that same opinion. I don't believe it exists from the judiciary that everybody is. Are there problems? Yes, I would agree with you.
And I just want to say the marshal's report does say that Cuyahoga County does not conduct any death investigations. That is not true. Our medical director does conduct an investigation with his medical team. Our wardens do their investigation, as well as our sheriff's office. The detectives do investigations.
One question that I had, Judge. You mentioned earlier on that you're waiting for an invitation from the stakeholders to get everybody in a room to discuss these issues. As an outsider, I'm a lawyer. I'm a member of the board of directors of the CMBA, but I'm a citizen first and foremost. The question that I would have is, why doesn't the judiciary take lead in that? Why not? If you're waiting for an invitation to the table, why doesn't the judiciary set a table?
I think you answered that initially. I don't run the county jail. So if I had the ability to go in, other than a court order, but that's very unusual to do. But I don't run the county jail, so I didn't author the report. And what I'm speaking of is, the report's been published. I didn't know about it until it hit the newspaper. Now things are being done to correct. I don't know what's being corrected. So when I say stakeholders, all of us, the suburban judges, I'm having suburban judges calling me saying, Judge, all I want to do is get the list of inmates that I have from this court in the county jail so I can review my list and make sure. Because I think all of the judges are doing that to make sure that their list, that there isn't somebody that's there wrong, or maybe we could cut someone out a little bit early. And the sheriff can't give them that list. We don't have a list. I've created that for them because my IT team could go in and using different qualifiers. So we've helped them do that. But I think that's the same thing going on in the Muni court is the administrative judge there, Michelle Early and I have talked, they have a hard time finding where their inmates are on a given day when this merger happened. I had a case, I believe, where a female was given an electronic monitoring and she was fitted with it, ordered released, but then back in the county jail for 3 days before she was released. She sat in the county jail with an ankle bracelet on for 3 days because of that mechanism of where's the organization. So go back to your question. You know, the public defender, the prosecutor, myself, the sheriff, the local police enforcement, the suburban courts, the Cleveland Muni courts. We need to be at a table, and the person who authorized and asked for the report is our county executive. And I'm saying I've not been given that opportunity in any fashion to say, are we looking at this as a team, and how does it affect all of us, and how are we going to roll some things out? Nobody's knocked on the door.
I think that's an absolute fair comment. You know, the last few weeks, again, we've been trying to address the situation, assess what we have, make some immediate fixes. But I think that's a fair comment that we should be at the table and we should initiate that discussion.
We have two questions, one right here and a gentleman right down here as well. And one over there as well.
And you've got 5 minutes.
Yes.
I'll be quick here. My name is Eric Long. I am a criminal defense attorney, and I do think we've been in a situation where we've sent letters to the warden anytime we have concerns. And unfortunately, I think once the letter goes, there's some notice, and my personal belief is that the threat of litigation thereafter is what gets our clients the medical attention they need, and I think it's unfortunate that everyone has that. So that's a comment. The other thing, in addition to my own practice, I'm here. I'm a member of the Ohio Association of Criminal Defense Attorneys, and we have a committee that is looking at jail reform. And this has kind of blown up as an issue in Cleveland and in Cuyahoga County. But I've spoken to lawyers across 88 counties in Ohio, and I realize that nobody here necessarily has any responsibility there. But I guess what I'm looking for is, independent of the decision makers and the stakeholders making decisions for how to better serve Cuyahoga County, do you guys have thoughts on whether this is something that can be done at a state level, whether it's through legislation, whether it's through some other sort of entity, and we can have some consistency? Because, and I commend Judge Nelson for taking that position. I've heard stories about other judges when they hear about these conditions in other jails in other counties, tell the defense attorney who's been there that we're exaggerating or making it up. And I think it's unfortunate. So part of what I'm working on is this something that can be done on a statewide level? So if you guys have thoughts on that, I'd love to hear that. Thank you.
Again, we're reaching out to other organizations that have expertise that work on accreditation, bringing them in, trying to assist us with this process, bringing the state in, trying to figure out why their report was so significantly different than our report. I'm not sure additional legislation is needed personally. These problems, as you said, there's other jails that probably wouldn't have a scathing report like this, so just something that we really need to work on. But myself, I don't know that I feel like legislation is necessary.
I'll speak to us. So, so Director Moore, who's leaving now with the incoming new governor, and he's retiring, he was fantastic, and he pushed what I believe to be ideas of how we can work with current jail populations. But I think he pushed the wrong way, personally, because he pushed the legislators here in the state of Ohio to put it into law. So the law now says to me as a judge, I can't put someone in prison. So I lose my discretion because of certain levels. And then they wanted to move levels of drug charges, and some of that's good. But when you're talking this question, systemically, how do you solve the problem? I almost want to say that Director Moore maybe should have looked inside and said, how do we, as the DRC in the state of Ohio, mandate these changes for all jails in the state of Ohio? But I think his eyes were looking outward at the courts saying, this is how you can reduce the population in the jail, as opposed to looking at inside and saying, hey, let's do it from within. We're the representatives of the county or the state for incarceration. Let's do change from within, and then you get legislators to say, here's how you're going to do it, right? So I believe there's a way to do it, but it's got to start at the core, which runs the state of Ohio. Of course, that's going to fall on the governor's lap.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Cherie Billingsley. I'm an assistant Cuyahoga County prosecutor. My question is, I guess, for Ms. Carney. I heard you speaking about you want to work with other organizations and bring in organizations and things like that. However, my concern is that the U.S. Marshals came in, investigated the jail, and some of the issues that became issues were things that are easily remediable, right? Something that you can easily fix. And what I haven't heard today is how you fix those things. For example, pee and feces on the floor. That's something where you bring in cleaning staff, right? In the courts, someone throws up, cleaning staff is there immediately. Someone throws up, cleaning staff is there immediately. Someone boo-boos in the jail, someone's there immediately cleaning it. So why isn't that addressed immediately, right? And why wasn't that addressed prior to U.S. Marshals coming in, along with placing chairs, right? People shouldn't be standing for hours or 24 hours prior to coming up to the court to see Judge Russo or some of the other county judges. Placing chairs in that facility doesn't seem like a difficult task when there are abundance of chairs in the courthouse, in the facility, everywhere there are chairs, as well as when it comes to investigating the deaths. It seems like an easy directive to direct either the sheriffs to investigate, or if there is a conflict there, having sheriffs investigate the COs, farming it out to the appropriate agency who will be more than happy to investigate deaths that are potentially on video, because it's a jail. And so I have an issue in that I'm not hearing from you what was done to address those immediate health, safety, investigative issues. And if they haven't been addressed, what is the timeline? Give us a date right now, a timeline when the facilities will be clean, right? When you'll stop having people sleeping on the floor. When will that happen, those immediate issues? Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. So some of those immediate were done. So we brought in an exterminator immediately, included to have a regular schedule that exterminator will come. There was we worked with our public works department, did a complete cleaning of the kitchen everywhere around. We're working with them to be on a monthly schedule for that to come. We are working on a contract for maintenance services within the kitchen to make sure, for example, the dishwashers, the equipment stays clean. We put the shower curtains, we made sure there's shower curtains in every stall. I mentioned some of the stuff we bought before. So some of those immediates we have been doing. The juvenile education program started yesterday. So Cleveland Metropolitan School District did start that yesterday. They're training. They train 3 times a week for high school courses. We also have an IEP specialist, as well as a teaching specialist that will come and provide those classes. So those immediate fixes we have done and we're continuing to work on to do. The chairs issue I can't speak about specifically, but I would imagine they're done, and it's, those immediate needs should be absolutely.
I don't know about the issue of, and I just bring it up with juveniles. So that's been a big concern of mine and the public defender. And while it's a mandate under the law that the Cleveland School District educate the juveniles who are incarcerated, it has not been done in our county jail here in the downtown county jail. It's been done over in the juvenile court. And again, it may have been before Brandy's time, but that's been a push that the public defender and I have been pushing. And it's about time. And unfortunately, some of those things had to be done in a report before they were done. But juveniles who are housed here weren't being educated and was very disturbing for us. And so that the public defender noticed me right away when he became aware of it. And it's been 9 months, 10 months that they were putting it in place. So I'm glad to hear that's in place.
Thank you for the forum. My name is Kevin Cronin. I'm an attorney and I do some criminal, mostly juvenile. So I really appreciate the comments about the idea of being housing juveniles with adult felons. I think that's terrible, and I hope that gets addressed quickly. But the biggest issue for me is, I think you talked about, was the medical issue, because that I think was the real flashpoint that kind of really resonated with the community about some of these things. And it was the first time they really started noticing what was going on in the jails. And the concern would be that it actually manifests itself in quality of the judicial activity, because somebody can't participate in their own defense if they're off their meds and they're being denied meds and they don't have opportunity to have access to any of that sort of stuff. And that's an ongoing problem. And I was just in jail I was just visiting an inmate on Sunday who in Cleveland, and in the Cleveland jail, and it's just as bad in the Cleveland side with just as much atrocity about vermin and filth and disgust and overcrowding and things like that. So I think it raises up the issue that really what we're talking about is money. Is how do you pay for the idea that we have, when the health issue first came out, they were talking about, are we going to hire a company out of Alabama? Are we going to be able to privatize? Are we going to be able to pay our nurses less than they would get in Metro and save money that way? The issue of money is how this issue is getting to public attention, and it should really be about the justice that's being played out in the courtrooms as a result of overcrowding and things like that. And so I'm concerned about that. How do we get the money to solve these problems that we're going to need?
So I do want to address your first question, the juveniles. They no longer are housed with others, and they also have the requirement that they can't have sight and sound, so they can't be within sight or sound of others. That has been remedied. Previously, where they were regularly was not near adults. However, there was a disciplinary area for those that were undisciplined, and that was within sight and sound, and that was the reference in the report. We have fixed that. I think your question about money is absolutely fair. Right now, we do have the support of county council, who appropriates money for us. The county executive, this is obviously this is one of his primary projects that he wants to move forward and make sure. So it does require a significant amount of money to make these changes and move forward. But luckily we have the support of people right now.
I know we have one question coming up. One question I want to throw to the group, and then you can ask yours. I'm interested from any criminal defense practitioners. How does this impact your practice? Meaning, how does it impact the advice that you give to your clients? How does it impact what you're telling your clients to do, or how they are to proceed in their actions? You've got the presiding judge here. Here's an opportunity to let them know how that impacts. So after your questions, I'd be interested in anybody that practices in this space.
Get them out as fast as you can.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No, whether it's probation or something like that, just try and get your guy out of there, because it's going to erode while he's in there.
Will that force you to advise him or her to plead?
No, I wouldn't know. But I would try and get the probation people to try and move as quickly as we can to do some alternative, like an ankle bracelet, to get him out of there, because he's just going to, he will just, I mean, I talk and I see these people, but they are just eroding in front of my face. By the longer time they're in there, it's so harsh and overwhelming.
One second, he has been waiting. I'm sorry, sir.
No, go on. I'm
Come on,
fine.
we're good.
Right.
We don't have a whole lot of time, and I want to hear from you.
Yeah. No, I'll come back.
I'm Bishop Eugene Ward, pastor of Greater Love Baptist Church and an executive vice president of United Pastors in Mission. We just got out of our meeting. I want to thank you, Judge Russo, for opening yourself up to this kind of dialogue. Good to meet you also, Ms. Carney. We just found out when we had our forum last Thursday, I just found out that money is paid to the municipalities that they set the bonds, and most of the time the judges keep them. And we're trying to get these bonds lowered for people who have mental health conditions, as well as working with the bond commissioner. And I want to know, is that an individual who is set in their ways, that they have to listen to the ways of the judges, or are the judges able to give them an option to make a suggestion that a bond be lowered? That, as well as minorities being represented by public pretenders who really do not work on their behalf.
And I said it the right way, because they're in conjunction with many of the judges in what they're doing. They do not work with the clients who are in jail. And I do contend that if there were more people who look like the people in this room in the county jail, these problems would have been satisfied a long time ago, because of the fact that you don't have people and family in jails. As pastors, we have to deal with them. We have to work with these families as well as stand there in those courtrooms and stand on behalf of these individuals who are there. Is there any way that, and I did invite you, Judge Russo, I talked to your administrative assistant when Pat Fisher and Maureen O'Connor were here to meet with us, and no one was able to come. I said, send an administrative assistant. Someone should have been there to speak about bail bond reform. What are we doing in those areas? Because I'm watching and listening. Nobody talks to each other, and that's got to stop.
Okay, so first, I apologize that whatever the form was that we missed. I'm not sure when it was, but I'll take responsibility for that. I own up to that. So I'd love to maybe have another session where I can come and be part of that. So my public information officer is sitting right here, and you could speak with Darren, and we'll make sure I get over to speak to whomever. So the bond commissioner is someone who works for the court. So they're not an independent person. Tess Bennett and our department. So they work for the court. And in fact, the bond commissioner only suggests what the bond should be. So so it's not the other way around. I thought I heard you say, does the judge get some suggestion when the bond is set by the commissioner? The commissioner's bond is a recommendation. So the bond recommendation. So a judge could change that bond anytime we want, as we're sitting in the arraignment room. And lawyers today I'm seeing more and more of it, are asking and going to the rule and following the rule on why a bond should be reduced and why the person has ties to the community. So I'm seeing more of that. I saw less of that over the last 14 years as a judge. So I hope that answers the question. It's a suggestion to the judge. A judge can change it at any time. But I'm also asking the lawyer who's representing the individual, not only should they be arguing it at the time they're in front of the arraignment judge, but when it gets assigned to a judge, so then it's randomly given to 34 of us, the lawyer should also be going to that judge who's been assigned the case and arguing again for a motion for a bond reduction or for reasons that need to be argued in front of that judge. So that's something I push to the bar, to the CCDLA, and to the public defenders to do. I would say it's not being done enough.
Judge, can I comment on that?
Yes.
One of the things, in May of 2016, we had a meeting with the judge, NACK, Judge Russo, and Judge Russo, we had a meeting, and we talked about the issue of bail bond reforms. It got happened. The judge, at that point, was a little more reluctant, but he's got religion. Judge Russo's got religion, because he's seeing what's going on. Every major county in the state of Ohio has initiated some kind of bail bond reform, major bail bond reform. Every major county that contains an urban community. Hamilton, all of them. I talked to the judge. He is working his behind off trying to convince his other 34 people he has to convince, 33 other judges, plus the other 12 municipal courts about coming together on some bail bond reform. Now, Cleveland Community Court is taking the lead on that, and they're doing it. But when I talked to the sheriff, I said, Sheriff, if you could estimate how many people should be released that you should have in here, he said about 30%. He said, we get rid of 30% of the people in here and make our jobs easier. Now, that doesn't address all these other fundamental questions of sanitation and just human decency, but in terms of reducing the jail population. So I want to give the judge some kudos, but we got to join them in the fight. And one good thing about the pastors is that's a set, collaborative organization, and working with them, we can do something about bail bond reform, which will really help us a long way in dealing with this whole injustice system that we have in Cleveland, in Cuyahoga County.
Yeah, so I'm just going to finish. So go into what the judge just said. I am meeting, and we have a team, and I'm going to say we're close to doing something. I'm meeting with his judge, presiding administrative judge, Michelle Early, KJ Montgomery, Judge Montgomery, my court on making those changes on what I need to do to move services up front, and I'm very close, and we're close to having it. We're also going to do some training for all judges and staff here at the end of January, mid-January, and then we're also going to open it up to public defenders and prosecutors to come and get trained on that as well. Going back to the question, because I didn't answer your second question, you called them pretenders. Again, I'm going to stand up for I will say there are some lawyers who are appointed who might be pretenders. And there are some public defenders who might be pretenders. But the majority, and Judge Nelson and I both worked in that realm as criminal defense lawyers, there are very good lawyers who are there advocating on behalf of their clients. So I'll just beg to differ a little that they're not all pretenders. But what's a problem that I keep talking about is when you get a retained client that walks into your office, you treat that person with appointments and meetings, investigations, negotiation with prosecutors, and you're working your butt off because you got paid money. And what happens when you get applied, you are part of our assigned counsel, you should have that same zealous representation regardless that you're getting $500. And I don't see it. And I'm challenging the bar, and I've been out and about talking to the criminal defense lawyers and the public defender. You need to go see your client. Right. And now we are removing lawyers, Pastor, that haven't met with their client that first 7 days when they come in on a first appearance docket. Judges are beginning to talk to a defendant, accused, and say, hey, what's going on? Have you met your client, your lawyer? And when they say no, I'm going to remove that lawyer. And eventually that list is going to be less pretenders and more advocates. So that's one thing. And then finally, I know the judge mentioned the jail. So you have to just, for those of you who don't work with the jail, it's not just common pleas judges, inmates, because it's vast. As Brandy said, there's over 300 inmates from the federal prisons, I believe 290 something. There's our prisoners who are awaiting trial and to handle their cases. There's local individuals from the Cleveland Municipal Court. There's sentences being handed down in Garfield and Westlake that are serving time in the county jail. So it's a vast amount of different individuals who are sitting in that county jail who need to be addressed.
One question may just be saying the answer may be obvious, but I'm interested in what.
Just so you know, it's 104, Matt.
Okay.
And I have a hearing at 1:30.
What in 30 seconds or less, Judge? What has the impact of serial been on this entire discussion?
104.
So I talked to Sarah over the weekend, and she and I have become friends because of the podcast. I will say this. I'm gonna end it on this good note because maybe I'll say it publicly as opposed to maybe I was gonna write it. But I think Serial is good entertainment. She does a wonderful job of conveying what her observations were, right? And some of those observations are bad, right? And some of those she calls out some individuals, and that's something that needs to be addressed. But if you were one of the 14 million listeners who didn't reside in Cleveland and Cuyahoga County, you may never want to come to this city. You may never want to come and visit because of what was played out in Serial. What I want to say is I have great co-workers. I have great stakeholders who work with me and our clerk and in our county executives. We have problems in Cuyahoga County. There are problems around the United States. And Sarah says that we are not an isolated issue. We let her come in, and I'm glad we did. And I hope that what we take from her is a positive movement. But we have a great city. We have great people who live here. We want people to come here, and we want people to feel safe. So while Serial has opened eyes to some, it's not as if those things have been ignored by the Criminal Justice Council and those who are in Cuyahoga County. Is it a push to get us to do something? I hope it is, because it's not specifically all on me either. But so I thank Sarah for doing it. I thought it was a good opportunity to hear how the criminal justice system might work in isolated instances around the United States.
Let me offer thanks to all three of you for being here. Brandy, Judge Russo, thank you for sharing your interviews. Matt, thanks for facilitating. Lawyers in the House, you get an hour of free CLE if you put your name on the list that's on the table. We're going to have the second Tuesday of every month, we have these hot talks. If you want to be included and you're not on our mailing list, put your name in the bowl that's on your table. Serial, by the way, is a future conversation for us, and I'm going to invite all of these folks back again for another follow-up conversation on what's happening inside the jail. Thanks for being here. Yay.